Hello everybody, Magical Mystery Mike here. Welcome or welcome back, and thank you very much for watching. As George Harrison said when the Beatles' Ultimate Compilations were first released on CD, it's nice to see you all and see you're still interested in the Fab Four. This video will cover the Beatles' 1973 compilation albums, 1962 to 1966 and 1967 to 1970. Universally referred to as the Red and Blue Albums. If you'll indulge me a quick announcement, I want to thank all of you who've subscribed to my channel for helping me reach yet another YouTube milestone, as I've surpassed 750 subscribers this week. If you're new here and interested in unique presentations of past, present, and future items from the Beatles, please me by subscribing to my channel. Enough of that, let's get on with this discussion of the Beatles' Red and Blue albums. Following an official announcement in April 1970 that Paul McCartney was leaving the Beatles, and the release of Let It Be in May 1970, no new Beatles releases from Apple Records were offered for several years. Understandably, each of the former Beatles moved on and began to distance themselves as Beatles in order to establish solo careers. Enter
Alpha Omega.
In 1971, a small U.S. business started up in the great state of New Jersey. By the following year, Audiotape Incorporated began to market an exclusive set of well-known Beatles songs, with a few solo tracks thrown in. Available on stereo LP, 8-track, and cassette, Audiotape Inc. advertised this collection in print, on TV, and over the radio. At just $13.95, Alpha Omega, a collection of 60 songs, is perfect for Beatles fans eager for a career retrospective. Who wouldn't want to place an order for that fabulous collector's edition, which even spawned a second volume? Let me stop you right there. There are at least two issues here. One, this was an unauthorized release for which Audiotape Inc. wasn't paying royalties to Apple. And two, the sound was very questionable, as the audio was sourced from dubs of American Capitol LPs. Great job, Audiotape Incorporated. Way to represent Jersey. Needless to say, legal actions were taken to remedy some of the damages incurred by this release. I'll provide a link to an informative article in the description below if you'd like to learn more about Alpha Omega. You may be wondering at this point, what's all this got to do with the Red and Blue albums? And I'm gonna tell you. In a 2014 blog by Chris Charlesworth, the respected music journalist and author revisited a 1973 interview he'd done with John Lennon. At one point, Charlesworth states in the blog that his conversation with Lennon turned to the then recent Red and Blue albums. Lennon commented that it was the pressure of the bootlegs that finally made them put out these retrospectives. Like to guess what bootlegs Lennon's referring to? With Apple recognizing that there was a market for compiled Beatles material, 1962 to 1966 and 1967 to 1970 were first conceived. In that respect, we can thank Jersey's own Audiotape Incorporated for motivating these well-done official compilation releases that fans are enjoying to this day. The Red and Blue albums were simultaneously released in April 1973. Both were presented as gatefolds. The cover of the Red album was an alternate shot from the photo session that provided the cover for the Beatles' debut UK album, Please Please Me. These images were taken by photographer Angus McBean. A photo credit is provided on the Please Please Me album cover and reinforced in the booklet included with the 2009 stereo CD of this album. Unfortunately, I have found no such credit included with any of the 1962 to 1966 or 1967 to 1970 releases in my collection. The cover of 1967 to 1970 was a clever reshoot of the photo used for Please Please Me. As I understand it, this was originally considered for use on the cover of the album Get Back, which would eventually be released as Let It Be, featuring Phil Spector's production and an obviously different cover design. In a 1980 interview, John Lennon stated that he had Linda McCartney do the reshoot of the Manchester Square photo. However, conflicting information indicates McBean returned to create his original 1963 shot. Both albums featured a gatefold photo of a 1968 image captured at St. Pancras Old Church in London, during the Beatles' infamous Mad Day Out photo session. The Red album had a reddish tint to the photo, while the Blue album featured a bluish tint. The back covers featured the photo opposite from the front, the later shot on the Red album and the earlier shot on the Blue album. Very clever design. The inner sleeves were colored red or blue accordingly, and the song lyrics were printed on the sleeves. Speaking of lyrics, if this video is making you say yeah, 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 beat that like button. Each double LP featured the Apple logo with red or blue background colors respectively. Advertised as the only authorized collection of the Beatles, the Red and Blue albums were touted as including songs selected by the Beatles themselves. John was later quoted as stating that George Martin had controlled the choice of the material on these albums more than any of the Beatles. Lennon then commented he was sent a list and asked his opinion, but that he was busy at the time. Whatever the case, the track listing is excellent. As stated by author Bill Flanagan on the Beatles' official website, these albums are considered less greatest hits collections than surveys of the Beatles' high points. The two double albums became essential introductions for fans who came aboard after the Beatles broke up. For millions of music lovers born after the mid-50s, these have been and always will be where the Beatles experience begins. I'll take a moment here to mention that I recently did a video on the One album, released in 2000, and subsequently re-released twice over. Comments left on this video illustrate that for many younger fans, One was their gateway to the Beatles. While One is an excellent single-disc compilation and provides a fine introduction to the Beatles, I think the Red and the Blue albums provide a superior experience. The Red and Blue albums include critical songs from the Beatles' history, such as Please Please Me, Strawberry Fields Forever, and Revolution, just to name a few. You get all 27 number one hits that were included on One, plus an additional 27 tracks for a deeper dive into the Beatles' catalog.
Twice the Beatles, twice the fun.
The Red and Blue albums were well received from the outset. In the UK, both albums cracked the top 5 in the album charts. The chart results in the US were similar, with 1967 to 1970 even reaching number 1. For what it's worth, the Blue album has always been number 1 to me as well. While there have been many vinyl issues of the Red and Blue albums since 1973, the first versions of these albums that I owned were on cassette tapes. I played the heck out of those cassettes in the late 80s and early 90s. As I hold these cassettes and look at them, seeing that the tape is not fully rewound, I can't help but think that at some point, some 25 years ago, a quarter of a century ago, I was listening to each of these tapes when, for whatever reason, I stopped the cassette and never returned to it. I haven't listened to them in this format since.
You know, it's funny what a young man recollects.
As I recall it, in the mid to later 90s, a good friend of mine gifted me the remastered CD versions of the Red and Blue albums. What I don't quite recall are the circumstances by which said friend acquired these items. We were broke 20-something summer volunteers, and if I'm going straight down Main Street, I had suspicions that the actions of a nefarious Tower Records employee may have led to this windfall. Or it may have simply been an acquisition through the use of a third-party discount and a very generous gesture. Either way, I've kept these discs in my collection in perfect condition ever since. Here's an interesting 1993 promo CD which combines the photos from both the Red and the Blue albums. Pretty cool. The 1993 releases of the Red and Blue albums were well presented in Fat Boy jewel cases with the plastic tray matching the corresponding color to the album. The accompanying 24-page booklets included lyrics, photos, a centerfold of the original gatefold photo, an advertisement linking the two albums together, and the back cover photo as it appeared on the original LP release. The Apple label with red or blue background was also retained for this release. And early pressings of these CDs also included a booklet advertising the Beatles catalog releases from the late 80s to early 90s. 2010 saw another CD reissue of 1962 to 1966 and 1967 to 1970. These issues used the remastered audio from 2009. The packaging was also formatted to match the '09 stereo CD releases of the Beatles' original studio recordings. Updates were made while retaining all of the key elements that fans have appreciated over the years. The inner fold-out uses the original gatefold photo, and the disc faces again retain the Apple logo with the red and blue backgrounds. The included booklet is high quality and contains the song lyrics, new liner notes by Bill Flanagan, whom I quoted earlier, and additional photos. In addition to having been offered as individual releases, a box set containing both the red and blue albums was also made available. However, outside the nice slipcase, there's nothing inherently unique about this edition. Finally, as far as CDs for my collection go, a Japanese SHM CD edition was sold in 2014. I picked up an encore pressing in 2015. 1962 to 1966 and 1967 to 1970 are presented here in a mini LP format, which I presented earlier in this video as an example of the original 1973 LP edition. For those of you who would rather download or stream your music, these albums are offered on iTunes and streaming services. As a penultimate sentiment to this video, another Bill Flanagan quote: "The red and blue albums do a superb job of condensing a rich and complicated musical journey into 4 discs that move easily through a range of styles. Through all the changes, we always feel at home because we are in the company of John, Paul, George, and Ringo. They never let us down." Indeed. And lastly, as we began this video with a 1993 quote from George Harrison, I'll give the final word to George as well. On Thursday, September 9th, 1993, before leaving the stage after a brief surprise appearance at an event to mark the compact disc release of the Red and Blue albums, George ended with a simple offering: lest we forget, all you need is love. Thanks for watching.